Okay, and we are live. Put on my music here. Listening to some Akira the Dawn chill hop with Terrence McKenna today. I'm just gonna draw and maybe not talk too much, because if I talk too much I'm gonna say something I might regret. I'm just very stressed today with all of the toxic drama that's going on in the leftist community on Twitter. So, Terrence McKenna.
Believing in these high-flown, complicated synthetic systems.
Post on Twitter and we'll get started.
I should make it clear, I don't believe this stuff. I find believing in these high-flown, complicated synthetic systems to come off sort of like pathology. So I entertain ideas, but I don't give belief over what I do. I'm a meme spreader. What I do. I'm a meme spreader. What I do. I'm a meme spreader. Meme spreader. A meme replicator. Naturally, this question arose in our group. Why us? Why us? Why are the aliens revealing the unified field theory of space and time to us? And the mushroom just replied without hesitation. Because you don't believe in anything. And that apparently is what's required.
Alright, grab the links from
You
YouTube.
all know that Van Morrison song about no guru, no method, no teacher, just you and me and nature in the garden? I think that's actually where it's at. So what I do, I'm a meme spreader.
Okay.
What I do, I'm a meme
Sweet.
spreader. What I do, I'm a meme spreader. Meme
Smudge
spreader.
guard. Okay, picking up where we left off on Saturday. This.
Fellow replicators of the meme.
Smudge guard.
Should go forth and tell other people, go forth and tell other people, and copy it into their head, copy it into their head, and this meme will spread. So what I do, I'm a meme spreader. What I do, I'm a meme spreader.
Okay.
What I do, I'm a meme spreader. Meme spreader. A meme replicator. Because we cannot evolve faster than our language. The edge of being is the edge of meaning. And somehow we have to push the edge of meaning. We have to extend it. Because if we appear to be confronted by insoluble problems, it's because we have the wrong language for dealing with this problem. You learn that with computers. Certain languages are good for certain kinds of problems. We have to constantly evolve language and push it forward. So what I do, I'm a meme spreader. What I do, I'm a meme spreader. What I do, I'm a meme spreader. Meme spreader. A meme replicator. the way I think of the psychedelics is they are catalysts to the imagination. They were back 100,000 years ago. The imagination, which was just this glimmering, this iridescence on the surface of deep cognition, was under the influence of the reciprocal feedback of self-reflection that is created by watching your own mind. Watching your own mind. Watching your own mind. Watching your own mind. Because it has suddenly become interesting, because it has suddenly been flooded by a psychoactive amine, that iridescence has been coaxed into language, art, architecture, music, poetry, the whole ball of wax. But now we know these things. We can uncover the secret of our origin. I'm very keen for the notion of what I call the archaic revival. And the archaic revival is this overarching metaphor that is the way for us to go to save our necks at this point. When a culture gets into trouble, instinctively what it does is it goes back through its own past until it finds a moment where things seem to make sense.
I'm going to take care of the background on that panel
And then
first.
it brings that moment forward into the present. The archaic revival brings that moment forward into the present. The archaic revival brings that moment forward into the present. The archaic revival brings that moment forward into the present. When medieval Christianity no longer made sense to a major percentage of the people of Western Europe, the intellectuals of that time instinctively reached backwards into the past, looking for a stable model, and finally they reached the golden age of Periclean Athens. And there they found Plato, Aristotle, the dramatists, and they created classicism. Classicism was brought to birth in the 1400s, 2,000 years after the death of Plato. We are the children of this classical revival, which we call the Renaissance. Our theories of law, our theories of government, our notion of justice, all drawn from classical Greek and Roman models, brought back from the dead 500 years ago by a bunch of Italian investment bankers who thought this was a good model to hang their civilization on. That moment forward into the present. The archaic revival brings that moment forward into the present. The archaic revival brings that moment forward into the present. The archaic revival brings that moment forward into the present. The archaic revival. So we must now reach far back into time for a new cultural model. Our crisis is so great that we have to reach back to the high Paleolithic, to the moment immediately before the invention of agriculture and the creation of the dominator ego. In spite of my nature boy thrust in most contexts, I'm very interested in virtual reality and the idea of making the imagination explicit or interiorizing the exterior world. one vision that I've had of the kind of future utopia is it opens on a world which looks like our world of 10,000 years ago. People live tribally, they are physically perfect, they are naked, they want for nothing. They appear to have no material culture whatsoever. Then when you shift your point of view so that you're inside one of these people's heads, you discover that when they close their eyes, there are menus hanging in space in front of them. And by glancing at these menus with a certain intensity, they are able to make their way into a culture that is entirely three-dimensionally present for them, but which nowhere impinges on the world of three-dimensional space. Sort of the idea that you could have the Vatican Library installed optionally when you have dental work. I don't think this is that far-fetched. I mean, a lot of money is going towards this. Money can be made from this. We have to figure out, unless we're ready to, hang the rascals, then we're going to have to figure out some way to make money out of saving the world, saving the world, saving the world. We're going to have to figure out some way to make money out of saving the world, saving the world, saving the world. And I think these entertainment technologies are the way to go. I think that what we should all be trading in 15 or 20 years from now is ideas. And ideas should be worth more than anything.
Will you on that? I'm sorry if I'm not more entertaining or upbeat or chipper today. Just mentally and emotionally and spiritually drained. Twitter is draining. I should spend less time on it. And it's where I've built most of my sense of community, aside from satsang. I need to spend more time with satsang.
History is just a 25,000-year dash from the trees.
Hey, Chili Jaws. Welcome.
To the starship. History is just a 25,000-year dash from the trees to the starship. And while it's going on, it's wild and woolly. But it only lasts like that. And then you're in the starship. And then you're in the
How are you doing today, dude?
And then you're in the starship. And then you're in the starship. And then you're in the starship. Because we are like bacteria or something in the shortness of our lifespan. To us, 25,000 years, you can get lost in the middle of that and you can't see either end. But from the point of view of a species, it's just instantaneous. History is just a 25,000-year dash from the trees to the starship. History is just a 25,000-year dash from the trees to the starship. 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 You know, this thing happened 65 million years ago. A very large object collided with the Earth. everything on this planet larger than a chicken died. Some people think in a single moment. But what's peculiar is there appears to have been a major dieback of species underway before the impact. That in the million years preceding the impact, there was some kind of echo crisis on the planet. And then this
I changed my
asteroid
camera to
struck.
Procreate.
You know, the dinosaurs
well,
that we find are the
when you
lumbering,
start your
enormous
stream,
ones, but
let's see if
always
it
agreed that there were a vast
still going. Good.
number of small
When you start your
boned
stream, you go down here to go live.
dinosaurs that were much smaller. Is it possible
that just shows
there
this.
was a breakout of intelligence?
But from there, it should give you
There was an intelligent species
it should give you a page where you can make a bunch of different options.
evolving a technical
And from the options, if you just hit done, it will take you to a screen that says start broadcast. And you just want to make sure your microphone is turned on. That's just one button below the start broadcast. And it should just start screen sharing as easily as that. If not, let me know. And I can definitely find a tutorial for you. Maybe just do a screen record and post that. So you were streaming class, or you were streaming your art with your kids around? Turn that brush density up.
One scenario for solving our problem is a mass migration into
Streaming
the
class with
past.
kids for gotcha.
We could literally dump this whole thing and go 100 million years into the past of the planet.
Well, I hope it was a good day in the virtual schoolroom then.
That's set up there in a confined zone. If it were only 10,000 years deep, it would never show in any fossil record. If we held ourselves to a 10,000-year wide window, that's such a brief period of time and so long ago that we would basically just appear to have disappeared. I think this is a haunted planet, and we are a haunted species. I think this is a haunted planet, and we are a haunted species. Every solid body in the solar system is heavily cratered. I think this is a haunted planet, and we are a haunted species. Some of these craters are planet smashers. There is considerable and ever-increasing evidence that the cosmic neighborhood is fairly unstable. Is it possible that biology is somehow prescient, that biology somehow exists in eternity and knows the fate of the planet, and that what we are is a desperate strategy of escape, and that the planet actually can sense the possibility of a complete life-destroying
Oh, that sounds like fun though.
impact? I think this is a haunted planet, and we are a haunted species.
I bet kids start to get really restless in December, though. But I imagine arts and crafts would be a good way. A little bit of story time would be a good way to keep them captivated. Though I'm sure it's extra hard to do so with the digital classroom. Getting kids to sit still and pay attention for more than 10 minutes is difficult at the best of times. I'm sure.
Enormous stars. There's a scar 1.5 billion years old on the Canadian shield that is twice the size of the lunar crater Copernicus. Now, what is going on? What is going on? What is going on?
That's
What
working.
is going on? Now, what is going on? What is going on? What is going on? What is going on?
Okay, this chill step isn't working for me. I am going to try some non-Akira the Don chill step. See if I can get to pull up.
What we suppose it
There we go.
to be. And that we are in effect presented with a 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, 11-dimensional koan, a labyrinth, a puzzle.
Oh, thank you.
Kind of
Yeah, these are just the rough ends for my pencil stage.
and it's all done in the mind.
I'm trying to get everything blocked in before I do any sort of real detail work.
World
I don't need to add
is
too much detail to
actually,
these, though.
syntactical in nature.
I might actually ink
This is
straight from the
something
roughs.
you, in the philosophy
We'll
departments
see.
Or the physics departments, that the universe is made of words, and that there has to be a speaker and there has to be a hearer. Photons, quarks, anti-newmatter, that's not what it's about. That is a linguistic model that floats above the bedrock of syntactical connectedness. That
Be
mind
careful to
travels
not make that a tangent line.
to create networks that it interprets meaningfully. That's what's really going on. So, and I am not one to reach for, the metaphors of spirit with the connotation of moral opprobrium and all that, but there is a dimension which is accessible to each and every one of us that is so appallingly, titanically, and bizarrely different than the continuum that we're currently residing in, that it seems to throw doubt on the entire effort to understand the world as it's been carried out over the past 1,500 years. In other words, there is an object in this mental space which, as culture-creating creatures, we are attempting to colonize and invade this cultural space through the concrescence of language. In other words, through exteriorizing our ideas as tools, we are invading this cultural domain, this alternative reality, and the exploration by drugs.
Thank you so much for tuning in today, dude.
And then the pervasive problem with other sorts of drugs in the society.
Okay.
And it cuts very close to the core of ourselves as creatures. I mean, we are addictive animals.
It's actually Terrence McKenna.
To everything.
It's another one of my favorites, although I do have a Alan Watts chill step in the queue next, I believe. Yeah, Alan Watts and Sapphiris is next. This one is a 1 hour Terrence McKenna chill step mix. He can be a little bit odd at times. He's kind of a madman. But he's also kind of genius in a few of his theories and talks. I don't know. I like him at the very least. I definitely have to be in the mood for Terrence McKenna, though. Today it seems like a good way to kind of de-stress and unwind. Today is a little bit high tension. Some of the drama going on leftist Twitter.
I mean, when a pair of lovers are parted, the withdrawal symptoms are indistinguishable from heroin. I mean, vomiting, shaking, uncontrollable emotional outbursts, sleeplessness, short temper, hysteria. This is real. It is what romantic love is a pheromonal bonding, an exchange of chemical messengers which takes these two autonomous organisms and welds them into one galaxy of need and intention and understanding and expectation. But when you just tear that apart, people are, shook up. We addict to political ideals, all kinds. I mean, it's wonderful what's happening in Peking, but several decades ago, the same thing was happening in Berlin to a different beat.
No. There we go. Oh, I am tired today.
People find an idea and it works, and all barriers appear to be movable and all goals attainable.
A little bigger, actually.
We invent money, which is kind of a multi-transformable drug. It stands for everything, everything you ever wanted, and you can addict to money.
Twitter is always drama central. It's just so hard for people to be civil and agree that we all need to be treated fairly on there. Yeah. Doubly so when anybody claims to have made a suicide attempt because of Twitter. Which somebody did this morning. And that, you know, I get into this mindset of feeling like I need to help solve those type of community conflicts. And when they escalate to that level, I kind of wish I had stepped in sooner and tried to aid that person in some way. But at the same time, especially if this person has the mental health problems that I think they have, I know that they'll most likely see that as them being ganged up on. And it has the potential to just blow up in one's face. So just kind of going around and letting everybody know what's probably going on with this person, and that we all need to kind of take a step back before this person escalates things further. You know, right now I'm seeing that as the only role I should be playing in this. I do get this weird sense of responsibility for others, but there's only so much you can do. There's only so much that until you say, you know, this person needs somebody who's a trained professional, and I am not that. I'm trained in de-escalation and somewhat mediation, though I could use more training in mediation.
Because what we're talking about here is,
but what this person needs is a therapist, and they're not going to get that on Twitter. But I hope they do get the help they need. But in the meantime, I'm just trying to take care of my own mental health and not, take it. Not even take it personally. It's just not feel too protective of my friends to the point that I make it my business. Just taking time off Twitter, telling my friends, go play a video game or read a book. Don't let them get to you. And just kind of everybody just take a step back. At this point, I think that's all that can be done as far as harm reduction. And I do think that at this point, harm reduction is the name of the game. Ooh, I really was not kidding when I said leftist Twitter takes infighting to a whole new level. I was a member of Wi-Fi for a while when I still identified as a woman in the illustration community, and there was definitely, a little bit of drama, a little bit of arguing and shit-talking, but nothing to the level that you'll find in the activist community, just because all sorts of people are drawn to activism. And some of those people, they need to really do some more inner reflection and personal work before they engage in trying to change anything on a social, political sphere. Because otherwise it creates more damage and more harm than it clears. Self-included. I have work on myself I still need to do too. And I think that's part of why I'm not engaging with them on this topic. But at the same time, there's a certain level of trauma that I think it's best for people to just step away from activism altogether. And I think this person has that level of trauma. So, just everybody just log off Twitter for a little bit.
Subjugation of women,
You'll see the rest of the beauty in the world, because the rest of the world is a lot kinder than that. That's for sure. Not always. The world can be a cruel place, but not as cruel as Twitter, I don't think.
Because you see what the government
in some regards. In some regards, way worse.
Perhaps believes itself, although
Yeah.
I doubt it.
I'm
is
tired
that
and I'm
we
bubbling.
would
My
return to
apologies.
the beast. That's all.
Yeah, it brought up old stuff with people I have known who are borderline. And it is never... It's good to have compassion for people with borderline disorder. It's never good to engage in an argument with somebody who has borderline disorder. Especially when they start splitting. So once they start doing that, you really can't make inroads with them. And I have known too many people like that, unfortunately. I think I can make this car boot bigger.
You know, we would just shoot junk and tooth blow and flop around in ruinous orgies until hell froze over.
Okay,
and
Terrence
they,
McKenna.
wiser,
Dang.
sterner, more disciplined than ourselves, represent the edifice of moral authority. This is a I'm doing it for your own good trip, see? But I want to return for a minute to the transcendental object, because that's the part which gets me off the most. It's taken me a long time to believe what was actually happening. I always said I could believe it if I read it in the newspaper, but I can't believe it because it's happening to me. And what we just have to do is to try and talk frankly based on our experience, which each of us brings to this, about, you know, the thing. How much of it have you seen? Well, what do you think? You know, how does it cast its shadow into your life? What is it?
Why isn't... There we go.
Because I talk on these subjects, I am a sort of a nexus point for information, and I gather stories.
At least you try. Most people want to tell other people how they want them to feel. Yeah, I've been ashamed of behavior in some of the SFF art community, but I try to take all sides into consideration before I open my mouth. Plus, I try to encourage people, even people who screw up, to try and better themselves. Some people think I ally with folks because I encourage a better path. I just have a hard time giving up on people. Most of my friends are very decisive and can shut it out. I hear that. I think that's a fantastic mentality to have.
These experiences, which are,
You know, I often try to do the same, and this particular person has been at the center of a lot of other toxic discussions and behavior in the community. And for the most part, I wanted to believe that, not so much that it was all a big misunderstanding, but just that people butt heads and nobody's a bad person. And I still don't think that anybody here is a bad person per se, but I think that at a certain point it causes damage to more than just them, especially when, you know, in the activist community, it's very common, especially when there's big action like there was with Red House, for people to not get sleep for like 3 or 4 days. Or like when we had the wildfires, we had like 3 huge infights in a week because everybody was just so triggered. And, you know, the wildfires in Portland, I don't know how close you are to Portland, but like you couldn't even breathe inside your house at a certain point. And so it's easy for people to get to a certain level of trauma and a certain level of stress where everybody is incredibly reactive. You know, even people just doing their best. So I think it's always good, especially in the activist community, to come with that mindset of, you know, everybody's capable of doing better than this. But at a certain point it starts to feel like it's almost intentional sometimes. And the truth is, sometimes in the activist community it is too. Because you do get, not necessarily moles, but people with ulterior motives too. And trying to discern that is incredibly complicated and difficult. You never know why someone has chosen to get involved with activism. It can make it a little bit hard to navigate at times. But I think it's definitely good to have that mindset of, you know, and this is what I try to do as well, of I don't take sides, usually. Kansas is pretty far away. I have many friends who marched and stood up. That's awesome. But, yeah. No, the wildfires, though, were something else. Yeah, I just want to believe that everybody... I try to always believe that everybody is doing their best. What they're doing their best for, I don't necessarily know that. But uncertainty is also, you know, par for the course. Really, that's just par for the course for life. Life is uncertain. We don't know why anybody does anything they do. You know, all we can really control is our own mindset and our own actions, and I try to always keep that in mind. Like, before I'll call anybody else out, I try to call myself out. Because I think if I want to see a change of behavior in the community, that change of behavior has to start with me. Because otherwise, you know, it's really common to see a lot of hypocrisy, a lot of people who will point fingers but then do the exact behavior that they dislike seeing in others. And I'm certainly, you know, capable of that as well. But I think awareness helps, and being willing to own up to one's mistakes helps. And being ready to take accountability without excuses helps. I think right now what I'm most tired of seeing in the community is excuses. So I'm trying to do away with my own. Even have it written on my mirror that's over my drawing board. I didn't choose to put a mirror there. That was here when I moved in. But I moved into a refurbished place. It says, no excuses. dry erase marker right across it. It's a daily reminder. So I know at the end of the day, the only thing I am really responsible for is my own actions and my own behavior. Other people, I have no control over.
And I just take
We do
that
what we
absolutely
can.
seriously. I think that
We
God
try to give people the leeway
he or
and
it loves the doubter.
the leeway that we can.
Treasures in paradise for the doubter that eclipse anything.
Like you said, give them an
If the
opportunity
message
to
is
do better.
working for me, and I have seen absolutely astonishing things. I'm sure many of you have too. I have seen things where I had perfect confidence that no human being had ever laid eyes on these places before. And I'm sure you have too. Because that's how big it is in there. It is, the further in you go, the bigger it gets. We are like monkeys sitting in the presence of a blind foster whose doorway has just been flung open. This is what we need to become conscious of. We need to dissolve the assumptions of the culture. And this is why LSD was so terrifying, because I firmly believe that one of the things psychedelics do is they dissolve cultural assumptions. It doesn't matter whether you're a member of the Politburo or a go-go dancer in Berlin or a professor of agronomy in Kansas, you will doubt your beliefs and your world if you take psychedelics. This is good. We need to dissolve our cultural conditioning.
See, sometimes people's personal trauma or motivations fuel their activism in a way that prevents them from seeing bigger picture. Same I'm calling myself out too. I have to examine my own actions constantly before I give my own 2 cents. There you go. I think it definitely helps, in business and in personal life matters and in activism to always hold ourselves accountable for what we intend to hold others accountable for as well. It's good to have a dose of humility. And then not brag about it either. Not going around saying I'm a humble person and I have tons of humility, but having genuine humility, being willing to, like you said, just being willing to call ourselves out. And definitely, people's personal trauma and motivations are definitely a reason why they get involved. And it's usually also a reason why, if they are very passionate about it, they should probably talk to someone first and get very clear on why they're doing what they're doing. I think that going to therapy and having really fantastic therapists has definitely made me more effective as an activist, although there's still so much that I could do to grow. I feel like there's still so much healing I need to do on my own journey and in my own path. Just mostly getting out of my own way. Although I think that's true for a lot of people. We just have to... I think most people, we get in our own way. It's always a process of learning. I don't really like that shading just yet. I'm gonna actually look up using photo references both streams. I'm just gonna add some water lines.
Literally and perhaps metaphorically as well.
Oh,
illegal.
Sorry to hear that.
Forbidden territory. We're like South Pacific Islanders.
If it continues to be an issue, let me know.
Bring this plant into your house and you must go away to the big slammer for a while. This is a taboo. my position, which I don't suppose I should say I advocated, because as I understand it, that's one higher level of federal crime. So here is my position, but I don't advocate it, is that, people should be able to do whatever they damn well please. That government is for the convenience of people. And in particular, in the United States, we already have in place a clause which says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are inalienable rights. Inalienable. That means government cannot interfere with these rights. Well, pursuit of happiness, I don't think you have to be a shyster to believe that pursuit of happiness covers experimenting with psychedelic substances. Seems to me perfectly clear.
No, come back. Darn it.
Without an understanding and a familiarity of the psychedelic experience, you should be sued for fraud if you're practicing psychotherapy, because
Alrighty.
the dynamics of
Actually,
the
I'm going
mind
to take a
and about
station break here in a
psychotherapy
minute,
is about,
but
this
it's been
much,
fun hanging out today.
unless
Yeah.
you
It's
have
been fun hanging
had a
out today,
variety
Chili
of
Jaws.
psychedelic experiences.
Thank you for
That's
checking
where
in.
the confirmation of all this theory is,
And will
and
do.
that's where you find
Hope
out
you have a fun day
what
as
you're
well.
running from. And if you look at the cure statistics on alcoholism with LSD, it's phenomenal. Before LSD was made illegal. Now I understand. I don't believe these are chemical cures to drug dependency. That isn't how it works. It works like this: you take LSD, you're an alcoholic or a junkie. You take LSD. All your illusions and defenses are dissolved. You see that you're killing yourself and that you're a pathetic wretch and that you're destroying yourself and the people around you. And then you come down. And out of that experience, you existentially draw, in some cases, the power, the self-will, and the motivation to change your behavior.
Okay, yep. I'm definitely taking that station break. So I need to stretch.
Well, I believe that as a culture, we could do this. And this comes perilously close to sounding like everyone should take LSD. I don't believe that. I think that it's a calling. It's a kind of a profession. It's, shamanism is the best model. And I think that the rebirth of shamanic awareness is part of a much larger cultural phenomenon, which I call the archaic revival. I hate the term New Age. I think it's just, 11 o'clock news stuff. To save ourselves from what we have done, we must reach far, far back in time to prehistory. to a time when people and nature lived in a kind of balance.
All right, we'll be back at 3:22 p.m.
I don't mean just any time in prehistory. I mean essentially the post-glacial period called the Magdalenian, about 19,000
See you soon, folks.
years ago. And the glaciers began to melt, and the Sahara turned green again, and the cave paintings were done at Lascaux and Altamira. Bone antler technology was invented. It was the great springtime of our people, and the last springtime of our people. But in that time, in a partnership society, there was no oscillation between a matriarchy and a patriarchy. There are dominator societies and there are partnership societies. And gender has nothing to do with it. We can entirely overcome the bullshit about gender in talking about cultural forms. It's dominator versus partnership. And the partnership society that existed in those times was the quintessential expression of a symbiotic relationship. And this is a new idea that I want to get across during this month, which is our anxiety, our angst, our wandering in the wasteland is because there's something wrong with us that we don't know about. What it is this. We are symbiotic creatures. We require a relationship with a certain plant. And if we don't have this, we go slightly bananas. And this symbiotic relationship was disturbed about 12,000 years ago. It has to do with periods of drought in the African continent that forced people into the Middle East and to where they were no longer able to access this plant. It's all about substances. This is why we frantically search the universe for what my friend Leo Zeff used to call the perfect high. That's what we're looking for. We can't help ourselves. Whole cultures are doing it. And they don't think of it as a drug. They think of it as an epiphany, a religious system, a set of sacramental buildings, or a city organized on a divine plan. But what they're trying to do is restore order. And they can't do it because, like the romantic lovers parted, the partner is not present. And so we are restless, violent, neurotic, repressive, migratory, destructive, self-negating, so forth and so on. I think that we're coming to the place where we can actually begin to take an idea like what I just said and amass evidence for and against it and try to then cure ourselves, where we realize that we are all the children of some kind of very damaging thing which happened in prehistory. And it's plain as the nose on your face. It's just that we are so traumatized we do not see it. I mean, look at the story of Eden, which is the central datum, the central mythologium of our culture. It's a story of substance abuse and the consequent punishment that follows upon that, because Eve eats of the fruit of the tree of life. And it says in Genesis, if they eat of this fruit, they will be as we are. In other other words, it was specifically the issue of consciousness expansion, and Yahweh, the jealous god, the volcano god of a paternal, of a dominator culture, and said, no, you're not coming into that inner sanctum. But she had eaten of it anyway. So there was a parting of the ways. Well, this parting of the ways, I believe, is a metaphorical description of the breakup of this symbiosis in Africa and the fall into profane time, the withdrawal of the bride. This thing which was driving these religions on the plains of Africa was a tryptamine hallucinogen. It was specifically a mushroom which was occurring in the dung of the early cattle that were just at that stage being domesticated. The experience which that mushroom induces in us is no less overwhelming and transcendental and incomprehensible than it was to those people 15,000 years ago. We have nothing up on them. In fact, we may be in a worse position to understand it because our language is now carrying a millennia-long legacy of paternalistic, egocentric, materialistic, and empirical biases. They may have possessed languages that far better commanded
Okay.
the modalities of transcendental objects.
You're
than do
back.
I'm fascinated by the mystery of language because it's very central to understanding what psychedelics are. Why do I say that? Because, and I will refer again to DMT, dimethyltryptamine, as the most interesting for many reasons of these psychedelics. But today I just want to mention one aspect of it. In the trance that overwhelms you when you experience this hallucinogen, it only lasts for a few hundred seconds. And in that place, there are entities
Why isn't this
that
drawing?
are making
Why do
sounds
you do?
which visibly condense before you. In other words, language has the potential, I swear to you, language has the potential to be seen rather than beheld.
There we
Well,
go.
I saw this years ago in DMT flashes, and lo and behold, a thorough inspection of Philo-Judaeus, who lived contemporary with Jesus Christ and was an Alexandrian Jew. Philo-Judaeus talks about what he calls the Logos. The Logos was an interiorized teaching voice, which Greek ecstatics sought to contact. And Philo says, he sets up a little dialogue, and the first speaker says, what would be a more perfect logos? A more perfect logos than the informing teaching voice. And Philo answers, the more perfect logos would go from being heard to being beheld without ever crossing over a noticeable moment of transition. Astonishing. I mean, I always wondered, did they know what they were talking about? What did it mean to them? What did it mean to him to write that sentence? Well, we'll never know, so here's what it means to me. means that the program of language is an open-ended one, and that we are dynamically caught up in it. That we are language. That's what distinguishes us from those who chirp and twitter and romp in the trees. That we are language, and that language is evolving. It's changing, and that in fact what we call culture is nothing more than a kind of shockwave trailing behind the forward edge of this language-making capacity. Because you can't invent it before you can say it. You can't sell it before you can describe it. You can't do anything with it until it exists as a commandable set of syntactical connections. So in one sense, what the psychedelics are for us as a species, rather than for each one of us as an individual, what they are for us as a species is an enzyme that catalyzes the language-making capacity. What is an enzyme? An enzyme is an organic catalyst. What is a catalyst? A catalyst is a chemical agent which causes a chemical reaction to proceed faster than it ordinarily would. I think that the astonishing proliferation of cultural effects, languages, religions, ontologies over the past 40,000 years out of nothing, because before that human organization was, it was dull back there for 1 million or 2 years. There was, so far as we can tell, no material culture at all. Now, you may wish to defend that it was wonderful, but you will find you have no evidence for it. But suddenly, after staying stable for 1 million years, the human brain size doubles almost overnight, and there is this cascade of cultural effects. I maintain that it has to do with pastoralism as a behavioral habit, bringing these proto-hominids into contact with psilocybin as a dietary element, and that psilocybin specifically catalyzed certain qualities of the human organism that worked to its evolutionary advantage, such as consciousness. Can you imagine a more multi-purpose, mutational, adaptational change that would serve you well than being able to think clearly? You can handle any problem. Give me a problem. I'm a thinker. I can handle it, So, the catalysis of language, well then, it only ceased 2,000 years ago at Eleusis, when triumphant Christers stomped out paganism wherever they found it, and all of these mystery religions were driven underground and forgotten. But the point is, 2,000 years is all that we've been away from this. And in that 2,000 years, we've elaborated the most lethal set of assumptions and cultural conventions ever brought forth. War before people used to knock each other on the head, but in the hands of these unstoned dominator types with this linear linguistic bias, which then is totally reinforced by the printing press, well, you see, it's a suicidal cultural style. Well, one of the things that I think happened in the 60s that supports my case in the wake of LSD, you see a tremendous enriching of language, endlessly sneered at by those who don't talk that way. But, it introduced the notion of the vibe, the ego trip. These are worthwhile concepts. The bummer, the flashback. These are linguistic pearls that, crystallized out of that experience. If you understand what I'm saying, it's because my incoming words cause you to go to your dictionary and look them up one by one, and if your dictionary is pretty close to my dictionary, we will understand each other. But the whole act of communication depends on this assumption that the dictionaries are the same. If they're not the same, then you will not understand me. If, on the other hand, I could make you see what I mean, this is not a culturally conditioned avenue of information transfer. You don't have to learn English to look at an English woman. It's easy. You just do it. It's at the biological level. And so this is, I think, in terms of consciousness expansion, as a general notion, to what direction is it moving?
Definitely
it's
taking a
in
nap
the direction
after
of literally a clarifying of language, a clarifying of language into something that can be beheld, and it's an arrow toward a greater domain of existential validity that each of us can move in.
Excuse me. Goodness.
To tell each other. The whole dominator style of unstoned culture engineering is ego. That's what happens when you don't take psychedelic drugs. As a culture, ego flows in. That's what was happening on the plains of Africa. Every Saturday night, everybody was getting loaded, and boundaries were dissolving. They were taking these things, and they were having, group sex, basically. These were the two things. It's clear because of the quality of psilocybin that it actually, at mid-range doses, causes arousal. You see, at very low doses, it increases visual acuity. Therefore, your hunting improves. Therefore, you and your progeny are more successful. And then at slightly higher doses, everybody's horny, and there's a lot of activity in the group and partying. At higher doses, then that turns into religion and slam to the floor of the cave.
Okay, well, being on today's stream it's definitely
So
helped
it's
with my
this
mood.
three-step thing which plays
Still
on
going
our
to take that
basic
nap.
needs to drive us into a deeper and deeper relationship with this mystery. And it's such a huge idea that this is what we are, that this is so fundamental, that this isn't just some curiosity of, hedonic West Coast, so forth and so on, but that it is in fact central to understanding and defining humanness and to trying to grab some of the controls of this sinking submarine of a planet and get it back up to the surface long enough for us to all climb in a rowboat to make our way somewhere. So thank you for being here today, all of you.
All right, and on to Alan Watts.
Well, now, I was discussing two of the great myths or models of the universe which lie in the intellectual and psychological background of all of us. The myth of the world as a political, monarchical state in which we are all here on sufferance as subjects of God, in which we are made artifacts who do not exist in our own right. God alone, in the first myth, exists in his own right. And you exist as a favor. And you ought to be grateful. It's like your parents come on and say to you, maybe, look at all the things we've done for you. All the money we spent to send you to college. And you turn out to be a beatnik. You're a wretched, ungrateful child. You're supposed to say, sorry, I really am. But you're definitely in the position of being on probation. So that idea of the royal God, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, which we inherit from the political structures of the Tigris-Euphrates cultures and from Egypt. The Pharaoh Amenhotep IV is probably, as Freud suggested, the original author of Moses' monotheism.
Where did I put you
And
on?
certainly the
There you go.
Jewish law code comes from Hammurabi in Chaldea. And these men lived in a culture where the pyramid and the ziggurat is a Chaldean version of the pyramid, indicating somehow a hierarchy of power from the boss all the way down. And God, in this first myth that we've been discussing, the ceramic myth, is the boss. And the idea of God is that the universe is governed from above. But you see, this parallels and goes hand in hand with the idea that you govern your own body. That the ego, which lies somewhere between the ears and behind the eyes, in the brain, is the governor of the body. And so we can't understand a system of order, a system of life in which there isn't a governor. O Lord our governor, how excellent is thy name in all the world. But supposing, on the contrary, there could be a system which doesn't have a government. That's what we are supposed to have in this society. We are supposed to be a democracy and a republic. And we are supposed to govern ourselves. And yet, as I said, it's so funny that Americans can be politically Republican. I don't mean Republican in the party sense. And yet, religiously monarchical. It's a real strange contradiction. So what is this universe?
I just got some mail. Quick break for mail time. A letter from my pal Will Carroll. Aww. He sent me a holiday card. Merry Christmas and happy not 2020. Yes, please, no longer 2020. See, dear Rachel, wishing you a very happy holidays and hoping the new year brings you lots of love, joy, and new adventures. Thankful for you, friend. Keep smiling, Will Terrell. Aw, that's so sweet. Then in printed word, may you find many reasons for cheer in the new year. And can't wait to see you when things are all clear. With love from our family to yours, the Terrells. Aw, cute. Well, that card is staying right here on my desk.
Is it a republic?
I don't even necessarily celebrate Christmas anymore. I'm more of a
Is it
winter solstice kind of gal.
or an organ?
Ooh, I just
Because you see, if it's a
misgendered
mechanism,
myself. I'm more of a
either it's a
winter solstice type of person, but
fully automatic.
that is a very sweet Christmas card. I do still love Christmas. That is a very cute card. Did a great job on the illustration, which I know you
It's
can't
not
see.
that, it's an organ.
It's all for me.
And an organism is a thing that governs itself. In your body, there is no boss. You could say, you can argue, for example, that the brain is a gadget evolved by the stomach in order to serve the stomach for the purposes of getting food. Or you can argue that the stomach is a gadget evolved by the brain to feed it alive. Whose game is this? Is it the brain's game or the stomach's game? It doesn't make, actually, they're mutual. The brain implies the stomach implies the brain. Neither of them is the boss. You know that story about all the limbs of the body? It said, the hands said we do all our work, the feet said we do our work, the mouth said we do all the chewing, and here's this lazy stomach who just gets it all and doesn't do a thing. We didn't do any work, so let's go on strike. And the hands refused to carry, the feet refused to walk, the mouth refused to chew. And said, now, we're on strike against the stomach. But after a while, all of them found themselves getting weaker, 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 because they didn't recognize that the stomach fed them. So, there is the possibility then that we are not in the kind of system that these two myths delineate. That we are not living in a world where we ourselves, in the deepest sense of self, are outside reality and somehow in a position that we have to bow down to it and say, as a great favor, please preserve us in existence. Nor are we in a system which is merely which we are nothing but flukes trapped in the electrical wiring of the nervous system, which is fundamentally rather inefficient. What's the alternative? We can put the alternative in another image altogether. And I will call this not the ceramic image, not the fully automatic image, but the dramatic image. Consider the world as a drama. What's the basis of all drama? The basis of all stories, of all plots, of all happenings. It's the game of hide and seek. You get a baby. What's the fundamental first game you play with a baby? You put a book in front of your face, and you pick at the baby like this. The baby starts giggling. Because the baby is close to the origins of life. It comes from the womb, really knowing what it's all about, but it can't put it into words. See, what every child psychologist really wants to know is to get a baby to talk psychological jargon and explain how it feels. But the baby knows. You do this and this, and the baby starts laughing. Because the baby is a recent incarnation of God. The baby knows, therefore, that hide and seek is the basic game. See, before, when we were children, we were taught 1, 2, 3 and ABC. But we weren't sat down on our mother's knees and taught the game of black and white. That's the thing that was left out of all our educations. That life is not a conflict between opposites, but a polarity. The difference between a conflict and a polarity is simply, when you say about opposite things, we sometimes use the expression, these two things are the poles apart. You say, for example, with someone with whom you totally disagree, I'm the poles apart from this person. But your very saying that gives the show away. Poles. Poles are the opposite ends of one magnet. And if you take a magnet, it's a north pole and a south pole. Right, chop off the south pole. Move it away. The piece you've got left creates a new south pole. You never get rid of the south pole. Things may be the poles apart, but they go together. You can't have the one without the other. That's the basic idea of polarity. But what we're trying to imagine is the encounter of forces that come from absolutely opposed realms. They have nothing in common. When we say of two personality types that they're the poles apart, we are trying to think eccentrically instead of concentrically. And so, in this way, we haven't realized that life and death, black and white, good and evil, being and non-being,
Excuse me. Goodness.
they imply each other, so that you wouldn't know the one without the other. Now, I'm not saying that that's bad. That's fun. You're playing the game. That you don't know that self and other go together in just the same way as the two poles of the magnet. So that when anybody in our culture says, slips into the state of consciousness where they suddenly find this to be true, and they come on and say, I'm God, we say, you're insane. It's very difficult. You can very easily slip into the state of consciousness where you feel you're God. It can happen to anyone. Just in the same way as you can get the flu or measles or something like that, you can slip into the state of consciousness. When you get it, it depends upon your background and your training as to how you interpret it. It's not the idea of God. Comes from popular Christianity. God as the governor, the political head of the world. And you think you're God. You say to everybody, well, you should bow down and worship me. But if you're a member of Hindu culture, and you suddenly tell all your friends I'm God, instead of saying you're insane, they say, congratulations, at last you found out.
No, I don't know. I don't need Postmates. I need a draw. You don't need to know my location. Because their idea of God is not the autocratic governor. When they make images of Shiva, say he has 10 arms. How would you use 10 arms? It's hard enough to use 2. You know, if you play the organ, you've got to use your 2 feet and your 2 hands, and you play different rhythms with each member. It's kind of tricky. But actually, we're all masters of this. Because how do you grow each hair without having to think about it? Each nerve. How do you beat your heart and digest with your stomach at the same time? You don't have to think about it. In your very body, you are omnipotent, in the true sense of omnipotence, which is that you are able to be omnipotent. You are able to do all these things without having to think about it. When I was a child, I used to ask my mother, of course, all sorts of ridiculous questions that every child asks. And when she got bored with my questions, she'd say, darling, there are some things we're just not meant to know. Well, I said, will we ever know? She said, yes, of course, when we die and go to heaven, God will make everything plain. So I used to imagine that on wet afternoons in heaven, we'd all sit around the throne of grace and say to God, well, now, why did you do this? And how did you do that? And he would explain it to us. Heavenly Father, why are the leaves green? And he would say, because of the chlorophyll. And we'd say, oh. But in the Hindu universe, you would say to God, how did you make the mountains? And he would say, well, I just did it. Because what you're asking me for, when you ask me how did I make the mountains, you're asking me to describe in words how I made the mountains. And there are no words which can do this. Words cannot tell you how I made the mountains any more than I can drink the ocean with a fork. head on. Drinking the ocean with a fork is quite the mental image, though.
A fork may be useful for sticking into a piece of something and eating it, but it won't. It's no use for imbibing the ocean. It would take millions of years. So it would take millions of years. In other words, you would be bored with my description long before I got through it, if I put it to you in words. Because I didn't create the mountains with words. I just did it. Like you open and close your hand. You know how to do this, but can you describe in words how you do it? But you do it. You are conscious, aren't you? Do you know how you manage to be conscious? Do you know how you reach your heart? Can you say in words, explain correctly how this is done?
Excuse me.
You do it, but you can't put it into words. Because words are too clumsy. And yet you manage this expertly for as long as you're able to do it. I love the story of a conversation at an English country house at a dinner party, where the hostess started up the question of death and asked the various guests what they thought was going to happen to them when they died. And some thought about reincarnation, and others thought about various kinds of different planes of being, and others thought they were going to be annihilated. But none of the guests had answered except Sir Roderick, who was a kind of a military type, but a very devout pillar of the Church of England. He was the church warden, chief of the vestry in the local country parish. they said, "Sir Roderick, you haven't said a word. What do you think is going to happen to you when you die?" "Oh," he said, "I am perfectly certain that I shall go to heaven and enjoy everlasting bliss, but I wish you wouldn't indulge in such a depressing conversation." That's true, isn't it? Death in the Western world is a real problem. We hush it up. We pretend it hasn't happened. Our morticians, who are very smart commercial operators, know exactly what's expected of them. And they make death just awful by pretending it doesn't happen. See what happens. You go to a hospital, and you're at the end. You've got terminal cancer. And all your friends come around and they wear false smiles and they say, "Cheer up, you'll be all right." In a few days from now, you'll be back home and we'll go out for a picnic again. The doctors have their bedside manner. You see, a doctor is absolutely helpless with a terminal case because a doctor is, by the social definition, a healer. He's not allowed to help you die. He's out of role. Even though, you may sneak behind the rules and do it. But he's got to heal you. So he's going to keep you indefinitely on the end of tubes and all kinds of things. While there's a certain grave demeanor to all this, and all the nurses are so pleasant and so totally distant. Because they know this is there. And they may be frank with you. That's why they feel distant. It's not that they're not concerned. It's not that they're heartless people. But that they just don't know how to be frank. Like lots of people when they meet a drunk, they don't know what to do with a drunk. Because he's not behaving right. So, when you're dying, you're not behaving right. You're supposed to live. See, so we don't know what to do with a dying person. We don't get around that person and say, listen, man, listen, I've got the news for you. You're going to die. And this is going to be great.
All right. We are
no more responsibilities.
Past the 2-hour mark.
You don't have to worry about anything.
So I am going to call it a day for today's live stream. But hey, I at least got this entire crowd penciled in. I just need to do the background. 3 more panels. And this page is... Oh, no. Well, 4.5 more panels. And then this page is done, but at least as detailed as it is, I'm making progress. And hopefully I can move on to some non-crowd scene pages in the very near future. That will be nice. But for now, though, thank you for tuning in today. If you tuned in live, like Childers did, or if you're catching this later, thank you as well. But I hope you have a wonderful day, and, just remember to breathe. No matter what happens in life, no matter what's going on, just stay with your breath. All right. You can find me on Twitter as JustDulac. That's JustDulac. And you can find my website at racheldulac.com. That's RACHAELDULAC.com.